Okay, not so much a news story now, again, but what we are going to be talking about is Sonic X Shadow Generations. The game is out at the time of recording this, it's just come out. We weren't sampled with review code until a couple of days ago,
Yep.
and we had to buy the Nintendo Switch version. But, John, you are Mr. Sonic, you love these games, and this
Yep.
one in particular was on your radar for quite some time. You've got some first impressions that you're going to share with us, and I think we all want to hear them.
Sure. Yeah. So first of all, obviously this section is, I guess, for Oliver, it's like this is my wayfinder, if you will. So I enjoy these types of games, and just to distill it down, this is a boost Sonic style game. I like them because they combine this like extreme speed of like a very fast racing game with this like idea of platforming, chaining together combos that almost gives you that same high as like a Tony Hawk game, combined with like great music and just sort of like you get in the zone. Like when you really feel it and you're whittling down the time and getting through these stages faster, there's like this like it's just a level of excitement there that I really find engaging, and I think they do that really well. And so the pitch here is that they've essentially bundled Sonic Generations, the 2011 3D game, which I would widely say was the best attempt at doing Sonic in 3D up to that point, and it's probably still one of the best. But then they've created essentially sort of a sequel. And I almost compare this to something like Bowser's, what is it? It's the 3D world with Bowser's Fury, where it's like you basically have two games where it's split. From the main menu, you can either choose Sonic Generations or you choose Shadow Generations. Shadow Generations runs on a much newer version of the Hedgehog engine. It looks significantly more impressive visually, although Generations holds up remarkably well. Like it's really beautiful still. And they're doing a lot of cool stuff with the stages. It plays really well. And the main difference here is that between all these stages, that like white overworld area from Generations, instead of just being a side scrolling section now, it's opened up in this massive 3D zone that sort of like unfurls as you play. They say it was inspired by Sonic Frontiers, and you can definitely tell, which I think works well. Now, the first thing to note here is that both of these on PlayStation and Xbox, and of course PC, they can support 60 frames per second. PC can support up to 120, only in Shadow Generations, unfortunately. There is weirdly a quality mode, which
Okay.
but only in the Shadow portion. Sonic Generations is just flat 60 across the board. Although there is a weird thing where uh it actually there's a couple little bits of slowdown that occur that don't happen in the backwards compatible version of Generations running on a Series X at 60, which I thought was very odd, but that's fine. The thing though, I guess, with Shadow's side is that um yeah, it has that weird 30 FPS mode which just feels terrible, but at least at 60 it holds very smoothly. So there's a lot there. It's good stuff. I'll have more to say about those versions, but I think if you're playing on any of those platforms, I think you can have a good time. Switch though, uh, this is very preliminary. I literally just got this installed on the Switch because we didn't have pre-release access to it. Right, Rich bought this, and we were checking it out
Yeah. We couldn't actually access the game until launch day, which is today.
today.
And I was giving you a little bit of heat there for, for your participation in the Wayfinder section, but you are actually playing Sonic X Shadows Generation on the Switch.
Correct, because the download just finished during that section, and I wanted to talk about it here. So I literally just got my first impressions, and then when we took a drink
Hot off the
break,
press.
I also
It's the
played some
hottest of
further.
takes.
So this is very preliminary. I haven't done any FPS analysis, but my first take is that it looks great, but the frame rate has issues. And essentially, it seems to be capped at 30, but there seems to be very inconsistent frame persistency. So the whole thing just looks kind of juddery and not nearly as stable as it should. So not only does it seem to be 30, but it's not even like a stable looking 30, which is not good. I am happy they kept the motion blur in because they often cut that out of the Switch versions of Hedgehog Engine games, the post effects. but this actually looks great. I guess I expected Shadow Generations to run at 30. It should have run, but I'm a little bummed out that they only managed to get to 30 for the Generations 1 part, because that's an Xbox 360 PS3 game, guys. I know the Switch is what the Switch is, but I'm a little surprised that they couldn't get that up to 60, especially given how we know from PCs the requirements of this game. It's not that high, unless of course they've done some changes to it that have suddenly made it more demanding than it should be, which based on that extra slowdown you get versus the backwards compatible version, maybe it is. But I don't think 30 is good for the Switch version. And I'm just going to say, I'll have the whole report out, but if you're looking at this game, and don't even consider Switch unless it's your only option, is what I'm saying. And even then, maybe we'll have to wait.
A lot of people do consider Switch though, and it's like one of the primary platforms for that particular.
I know that's the problem, right?
Right?
Like Sonic is big on the Switch. This is where it should shine. Even last year's Sonic All-Stars, or Superstars, not All-Stars, Superstars, it took a gigantic graphical hit on Switch, but it ran smooth. You got a 60 FPS experience out of it. I think that was the right approach. But that was also Unity, not Hedgehog Engine. Hedgehog Engine is definitely a heavier engine from what we can tell. And they do a lot with it. It's shocking how good it still looks, but I think the performance situation is unfortunate, to say the least.
Yeah.
So
I've just been thinking about Yooka-Laylee, The Impossible Layer, which was essentially a game that was designed to run at 60 frames per second on the Nintendo Switch. And then it basically scaled gracefully upwards onto all other systems. And, if your primary user is going to be on the Nintendo Switch, I think that's probably the best way forward, right?
I think that's what they did for Sonic Superstars, but I think in this case, you just can't really do that because Generations already exists, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to make a shadow portion of the game that looks worse than that, right? They needed to push the visuals forward somehow. And if they can't even get Generations running at 60, like, what are you going to do, right? Like, maybe there's ways to pare it back, but that game is fixed in place. Like, it is what it is. What makes those games challenging, I think, is that the levels, because of the speed of the game, you traverse a tremendous amount of terrain in a very short period of time. So like it's an engine that has to handle absolutely gigantic maps. And I think that's just, there's limitations there. I don't know enough about how the Hedgehog engine works on the backside to say where their bottleneck is, but clearly, as we've seen before, they're just not able to get great performance out of it when running on the Switch. But hey, at least it's better than Sonic Boom on the Wii U.
Okay.
Which was CryEngine, baby. A CryEngine Sonic game.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Before we recorded, you were talking about texture filtering.
Oh, right. Yeah, I'll show that as well. They basically don't seem to be using anisotropic filtering, and I'm not sure why. Okay. It's weirdly not that obvious most of the time because of the speed and the motion blur and the way the game works. But like every time you're in like an area with a large flat open surface, you see like, oh man, the texture filtering looks like DMC Devil May Cry Day 1 on PS4, where it's just like there's it's basically like trilinear filtering.
Yeah,
I don't know why. To me, it feels like an oversight, like not a performance thing. Right.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm just looking at the Slack channel here and quote unquote, it's driving me nuts. That's what he said.
Yeah, I mean, I think Oliver would probably agree. Yeah, we're cut from that same cloth. When there's like a visual bug or visual issue in a game like that, it just like sticks with you,
Yeah, that is annoying.
I think so. I hope they fix that. I'm gonna talk about that and show examples in the video, just because like I would like them to fix that because it's not a cool thing.
Fair enough. Any input, Oliver?
No, it just I don't know. That original 360 release was 30 FPS, so
yeah, so it has good frame pacing.
Oh, and not the case on the Switch, I suppose. That's a bit of a downgrade. So it's not like that. I mean, I would expect a bit more, sort of, but it's also like that. It's kind of par for the course with Switch ports, unfortunately, especially considering the fact that, this is probably like a modern wrap or whatever, don't you think? Or whatever they're doing there.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know. I'm curious with the engine stuff. The fact that on PC generations is capped at 60 versus the Shadow portion, which and the way they're split leads me to believe that it is just literally two separate engines. It's like the older Hedgehog engine that they made run on the new machines combined with the most recent version of the engine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that strikes me as a bit of a disappointment, John, to be honest.
Yeah, that's not to say there haven't been changes. There are some visual differences in generations, like the way the depth of field works and a few other effects. They also added the drop dash, which didn't exist in the original. So they made changes to it for sure. It's not just the original. They also redid all the videos. So all the cutscenes are now 4K. They also redid all the UI, so it's 4K, because before it was just 720p and didn't upscale very well. It was very blurry. So all that stuff is improved. So it is good now for sure in that regard. And we've never had an official disc release version of Generations that runs at 60 FPS on consoles.
Okay.
Right. So that's also cool.